Okay, I'm live, I think. Okay, so we're spiritual beings in a physical body. Our thought creates reality, and we're all connected. Now, I got cut off yesterday, but I only got cut off after about 2 hours, so that was pretty good for me, wasn't it? Because I was only just getting started. Because, I am very slow at making a point. I'm not even making a point most of the time. I'm just saying stuff, information, stuff, knowledge if you want to think that it's particularly good, but, it's up to you what you make of it. It's all a fantasy. The first bit is not fantasy. Everything else after that is fantasy in the sense that I may or may not believe it. But I think there's possibilities, big possibilities, but I believe in fairy tales, as I've said before. So, if you don't believe in fairy tales, as I've said before, then, you're not going to be too interested. You're going to want something that has every bit of evidence, every bit of hard facts. But I still maintain myself that in today's particular reality, people seem to need 110% proof of facts before they will believe anything, whereas I think in the past, 60-70% would have pretty much convinced most people, and they would have accepted that to be 100% almost, whereas I think now we do live in a time where, almost too much is required for people to shift into fairyland, shall we say, which I suppose is understandable, But anyway, I'm rambling on again before I start. But the first bit, we're spiritual beings in a physical body, obviously. Our thought creates reality. With our thinking, well, obviously thought is thinking, so excuse me if I don't put these things very well. Obviously, our thought is our thinking. Obviously, our thought is our thinking, but the vibration and the emotion and the feeling behind it is what brings the whole thing into a reality. Without the feeling and without the emotion and without that vibration, which emotion and feeling is really vibration, I think, or frequency, or whatever you like. I could have this slightly wrong, but in essence, I hope that I'm not too far off the truth, okay? Okay, so we're spiritual beings in a physical body. Our thought plus feeling, emotion, everything is frequency and vibration, so that emotion and feeling is part of the frequency and vibration which gets sent out with a thought, and we're all connected, so it goes to other human beings. Could go to other things for all I know, I have to say. It could go to animals. Probably does. Originally, I personally think that in the original fantasy creation, shall we say, human beings were connected to every life force, and that includes animals and everything living, and the earth itself, which is also living, or was originally living. This will depend on too, and I'm going way off, this will depend on whether you think that this earth that we are now on, which is obviously very artificial and not 100% natural like it would have been originally. And not even if you don't believe in fairy tales, most people would probably say yes, originally even this computer-like, artificial reality video game that we're playing in was originally all natural. Most people would agree with that anyway, regardless of anything else I say. They would say, yes, the original Earth would have been natural because it would have had to have been. But anyway, gone off the track. Now, the title of the thing, I'm naughty really, because I will think up, even though I only thought it up in 5 seconds just before I press this thing on, the title for the video. Now, when I put the titles there, it is to get you to listen. It is true. So you will be disappointed with the content once I start chatting, shall we say. But at the same time, if you are fairly a thinking person, you might be able to make more sense of what I say than what I'm saying. In other words, I will put some things, because the title, if I get round to it, because this will be about the Life for Ruth movie, which I was supposed to be talking about many videos ago, but started the video and got sidetracked, which I tend to do, because that is about blood. And so the arc on blood of life. I don't know why, but I am of the mind that I think that the blood is fairly important on this earth. And there are certainly sections of this world that definitely believe that the blood is highly important. The blood of a human being. Now, but anyway, I will diverge just a little bit before I start, because I would like to mention that we live, even though we're spiritual beings, our thinking creates this reality, or certainly should. How much we are creating now and what we are creating now, I could not even guarantee, because, like I said, originally we were in a natural world, we were natural, we created in it. We created what we would add into it. We would, I suppose, at our best, and at high frequency, and a clear mind, we would probably create together, we would manipulate reality very well. But we do live now in a matrix, and the matrix is all artificial, whereas the original Earth was all natural. We were all natural. Some of us now are even a bit artificial, you could say, because we are in an unnatural world. We're in an artificial world. So that kind of means that we also, because we have incorporated technology, which is artificial, as you know, none of these things that I'm saying are particularly groundbreaking. It's only what context or what you want to make of them, whether you think it's good, bad, or whatever, that makes the difference, really. But certainly we have, in my view, we have changed a lot, and changed a lot even in recent times. But then again, I don't know the full history of this earth. I don't know how many civilizations have been and gone, been destroyed, started again. How far that technology went, how I only know where we are now. And where we are now is certainly very, even though it doesn't look in some ways, if you look around, that we are immersed in technology, in reality, we are swimming in it, literally. It is all around us all the time. So we are literally swimming in it. And as I said before, when I said, you know, we are like a fish out of water, well, no, we're a fish in water that is swimming in technology, whereas we're meant to be swimming in pure water, pure natural water, pure natural air, pure natural surroundings. This is just what I'm saying, okay? This is just my fantasy world. You know, it's not my fantasy world because it doesn't exist, but this is my view, shall we say, my fantasy world that I should prefer to live in. Okay? Now, I'm sorry if I'm getting sidetracked, but there are a lot of diversions around me. Because, like I say, we live in a matrix. We live in an artificial constructed matrix now. So that means that everything is not natural and we do not control it. We do not manipulate it consciously anymore. And I'm not sure when we stopped doing this, but quite likely, you know, that was a long, long time ago. But like I say, I can only go on now. Now I'm trying to concentrate here. But anyway, I'll ramble again and throw in as much little tidbits as I can. There'll only be tidbits, you can make of them what you will. You might be able to make more of them, add to them, and figure them out, because I don't have everything figured out. So, I was, if I'm not getting too sidetracked, see, I probably look really stupid making these videos because I'm darting around everywhere because there are so many distractions, even though I'm inside. If I was outside, it would be worse, but even inside. But that is the matrix, you see, because the matrix doesn't, the matrix keeps you in the matrix, keeps you focused on the matrix. And I don't think we're meant to be focused on the matrix. I think we're meant to be focused on nature, and we're meant to be focused on ourselves and what we're doing and concentrating. And we're not meant to, you know, like we're living in two worlds. We're not ourselves. We're not creating consciously ourselves. We're not even thinking consciously ourselves most of the time. I know I'm not. I have been controlled by the matrix for a long, long time. It is a form of, it does take you over. It is a form of mind control. Because if you're not in your own natural thinking and you're not consciously thinking yourself, that is mind control. Now, if you don't mind being controlled by another force, then, you know, you're in the right world. If you want to control your own mind and be in your own world, and a world that you are comfortable in, then you're in the wrong world, because this is not the original world. This is a different world now, and some people are adapting to it better than others, I would say. But it isn't really adapting. It is adapting, but it's really something else besides adapting, because if it's not our creation, it's not our choice or anything to do with us. It is a fish out of water, and it is like that, and we are suffocating in it because it is not natural for a natural human being. It might be natural for different other life forces, because there could well be other life forces. every different life force will prosper and develop and grow and flourish. Flourish is the word I'm looking for, in a suitable environment for themselves. The original Earth was a perfectly suitable environment for the human being. It is now not a perfectly suitable environment for the human being because it is artificial, and it is, some people might say, well, maybe human beings have changed. No, they have not changed. They have been made less, but they have not changed. But they could well be changing, I don't know, with the new environment, but that's not a natural process. That is not evolution. That is not development. That is deliberately making a hybrid of something, I would say, personally, like we do on this planet. We make hybrids. I was told this only a week ago. Even though, of course, I know it. I know that we breed different animals. We consciously make hybrids. We don't keep the blood pure, even of the animals. Title of the video, Archon Blood of Life. That is a smart title. I'm being smart. I don't like being smart. I don't like the word smart. I think it's a smart, I think you're being a smart if you say that. But anyway, that's just me being extra like that. But I lost my thought for a minute there. But yeah, we're in this unnatural thing. But anyway, the thing that I was going to mention was that I saw a documentary, it was, a while ago, quite a while ago, and it just come to me back. And this was where they were doing an experiment, you could say. Yeah, it was an experiment. Like, they had like a artificial robot. It was a robot. It wasn't a human natural being. It was a robot, but it looked like a human being, and it talked like a human being, and it had been programmed to answer questions and to ask questions. And this is an old documentary too, so I would think that there have been advancements since then. But even in this older video, which I can vaguely remember, the idea was that they would put the artificial robot human being in a room, in a situation where a real human would come in and interact with the artificial robot type human being. And the idea was to see how long it would be, or if, and what the reaction of the human being would be to the artificial robot-like human being. And this was a long time ago, but I do remember that the reactions were strange. At least I thought they were strange, but maybe if I had been in that experiment, my reactions would have probably been the same. But essentially, after the robot human being had interacted and talked to the real human being, then they would ask the human being, after the interview, shall we say, was over, what the human being thought about the interview. And some of the human beings said, well, yes, there was something a bit strange about that I can't quite put my finger on. There was something strange about the other person, because they assumed it was another person, or at least that was the setup, the idea. And someone said there was something a bit wrong, something a bit strange, and others, I'm not sure how many, but it was to my surprise, there was not that many that said at the end of the interview or at the end of the situation that that was not a real human being. Some thought there was something strange or something a bit wrong, and there were even others that thought it was just a normal interview with a normal human being, shall we say, which I thought was rather interesting at the time. So essentially, human beings, which are normally rather good at picking up on the finer things, shall we say, they usually have that sixth sense, that ability to discern, actually can't. In other words, if something interacts with them reasonably well, looks exactly like what a human being should look like, well, this could be anything too, it could be anything, then they actually probably cannot tell the difference. So what I'm trying to say is, this is the thing, is that we live in an artificial world. So, in this fantasy artificial world, humans are now so very used to what is artificial. And also they are very accepting of it. And they are finding it desirable. And as I said before in another video, there are, and this is actually true too, because I saw a similar documentary, not about artificial, not about proper artificial human beings, in other words, ones that actually speak and appear to think, even though obviously they're programmed, but they can interact in I'm not quite sure what the word is, a fluent kind of spontaneous way. Whereas even if, like I used to have a doll when I was very young that talked a few words, but it only spoke a few words. So if you asked it a question, you wouldn't get an answer. It would just say the same things. You know what I'm saying. But certainly I saw a documentary a few years ago, which I was very intrigued with. It was not about artificial life, but it was certainly about gentlemen, men, not women usually, but at least I did not see any women, men that purchased what they call life dolls. In other words, they're dolls that are the same size as a human being. They look relatively human. You can see that they're a doll, but they look very attractive and basically they buy these for their own entertainment, shall we say, or their own. Look, all I noticed was that when I watched this documentary was that one man in particular was madly in love with his life doll. He carried it round, he took it everywhere with him. In fact, it was the equivalent of a wife or a girlfriend, you could say. And he actually had a passionate love for this doll. And this doll did not talk. This doll did not interact with him in any way. And did not even move around the house. So I would imagine that, he had his reasons for this, because he obviously did not he liked the safety and the security almost of having something that he had control over, that was dependable, because he felt that, a real lady, real woman, real human being was too much of too unpredictable, too difficult for him, and yeah, so I found that rather interesting. But in thinking about that, I would have to say that if this was the case a few years ago, and of course, as we are now progressing where we have life robots that actually are almost at a thinking level, or at least appear to be at a thinking level, because they, like I say, can talk back to any question you ask, and they can interact with you seemingly not much different to what a real human being would do. So imagine, so what I'm trying to say is that if some humans are quite happy with a life doll, I would imagine, and they're actually in love with that, I would think that well, you see where I'm going, that if there was something that they could hardly distinguish, but if they you know, that they would be even more keen, I would think, even though I do sense that there is a strong control element, like I say, to that idea. But I cannot say how controlled something artificial would be. But quite frankly, I don't think that's really the issue, because human beings, we are quite controlled, because we live in a matrix, and we tend to follow directions mainly. Um, so I'm not sure what the, anyway, that was just a little bit of food for thought, okay? I'm not going to go any further with that. It was just something that come to me. I will go back on to what I'm supposed to be talking about, the movie Life for Ruth. But before I go on to the movie Life for Ruth, which is an old fuddy-duddy of a movie, which I think most people would probably not want to watch now, but you know, it's a simple movie, it's black and white, it's in the 1960s, it doesn't have any prominent actors in it, and it is a simple story and a low budget B movie that was made back at that time. And I did see it 2 weeks ago again after years of seeing it, only because I was going to make the video first, but I didn't make the video, so I thought, oh, I will look at this movie, because it's readily available on the YouTube and different things, because it's so old they don't charge for those types of movies, so it's free. But, and it used to be on the TV quite regularly, which was why I saw it, but I didn't gain anything more by watching it, strangely enough. I thought I perhaps would. But okay, I'll stick on it, because I was actually going to go on to another old movie too, because it just came to me the other day, because I think there's relevance. There's a lot more information in the new movies. There's a lot more that actually will show you how far our reality has really gone, I think. It's fairyland, but if you believe in the fairy tales and the fairyland and this artificial world, there's no reason to not suspect, at least, that this other reality could be going on, yes, behind the curtain, behind the scenes, or even in another, if you want to be really over the top, another dimension. But I would think that, even on this earth, not every part of the earth is the same. Even if you're fairly wealthy, you'll be living a totally different life to someone who is very poor. So, and I'm sure if you're in some parts of this world, your way of living would be totally different at a technological level. So I don't think there's any reason to dispute that, even on this earth, that although I might not see it firsthand because it's not my reality, because we're all in our own limited little bit, that there are other parts of the earth that are a lot more advanced and that have more technology than what we even have, and that have more gadgets and more this, and that can do much, much more. And it is an art, and if you're coming from the fantasy realm that I come from, where we live in a totally artificially constructed video game type world, well then, of course, that is then going to be the case that this world is I'm trying to find the right words, but it's naturally then going to be definitely the case. It is going to be what's behind the curtain, what is, I always go back to the Wizard of Oz, where the Oz, or whatever, if memory serves me correct, is totally operated by this man that works behind the curtain and pulls all the levers. And this world is very much like this, because it is controlled, operated. It is the video game of a God entity that has constructed it and likes to particularly play the video game with human beings. But then again, even though this is happening, there is still some differences between the human beings and the players and the controllers, and there is differences. Exactly what those differences are is clear to me sometimes, but I don't know if it's the whole thing. But I'm going to go off that anyway now and totally confuse you and myself and go off back onto the Life for Ruth movie. Okay, so in this movie, Life for Ruth, very simple movie, simple idea. It's called Life for Ruth because there is this man who is married and he has a little girl whose name is Ruth. He is a devout follower of a certain religion. I cannot remember the name of the religion. It could have been something like a Mormon or something like that. I do not know all the different religions. I have no interest in religion of any sort. But I do occasionally quote from a religion. I will quote from anything, anyone, anything at all. If something makes sense to me, if it rings true, if it has some spiritual validity somehow, that I know that it means something, that it is honest and truth of some sort, I will quote it. But that does not mean that I am affiliated with those religions or with the people who make those statements. I'm not. But I just thought I'd say that because it's easy to misinterpret what I'm saying. And I'm not, I'm not saying one thing or the other. I'm not saying you should not be part of the whole thing if you want to be or whatever. I'm just saying that this is what I do. I don't, I will just pick statements that I hear about or that I've heard about, because I do not have full knowledge on all the denominations, all religions, all histories or anything. I've told you this before. I'm quite ignorant that way. But if you can get something out of it and you can piece it together, that is good, you know. But it's entertaining if nothing else. Of course, I'm not saying that I may or may not have some core things of my own, but they're not what I'm making the videos for. I don't do that. That's not, I don't feel qualified enough for that. I don't feel strong enough on any single issue or denomination to even do that, because I'm just new to all this sort of stuff anyway. So it's not something that but I will quote from different things, different people, and it will be random. But at any rate, I will go on about Life for Ruth. But this fella, see, I go off the track. This fella, he was very strong on his beliefs about who he is, who his creator is, about God, about his religion. His religion was his life. He believed it 100%. It was no fantasy to him. It was no speculation to him. It was no, oh, I believe, but I have questions, or it was 100%. In fact, as it says in the movie, his God and his heaven was as real to him as his reality, which was why he made this choice in the movie, which I will try to get to quickly. Okay, so he's a gentleman who has a strong religious belief and believes, as it is, if you watch the movie, it says he believes in the literal word of the Bible, of the text, of the written words in the Bible. He takes them 100% literally. They are the word of his God. They are the direct word of his God. So, he has a daughter. He's married. He has a daughter, a young daughter, very young girl. She goes out on the little dinghy boat one day, although it looks like night in the movie, so maybe it is night, with another little boy, a friend. And they're obviously been used to doing this because they're in a kind of country village type on the water seashore thing that was probably common back many, many years ago, okay? Now, they go out on the boat, his little girl and a little boy that she knows. The boat heads towards the rocks, unfortunately, because the sea must have changed or something. And in this unfortunate situation, the little boy is thrown overboard. His little girl is thrown onto the rocks. You know, she suffers a head injury. He sees this while it's happening and he jumps into the water to save them. The little boy is drowning and his little girl is on the rocks but is not drowning, so he saves the little boy first because he appears to be in more immediate danger. Something that his wife was unhappy with when all these events come to pass. But at any rate, his little girl then, because he saved the little boy first because he was drowning, put him in the boat, then went to save his little girl. In the process, her head got banged against the rock. She lost a lot of blood. She lost a lot of blood. And so what happened was, when they got to the hospital, little girl's taken to the hospital. Little boy's all right. His little girl's taken to the hospital. She's lost a lot of blood. The doctor says, we can save her. She just needs a blood transfusion. She's in critical condition, but if we give her a blood transfusion, pretty sure she'll pull through. Unfortunately, he is a believer in the literal written word of the Bible. So he is in dilemma state and immediately says, but it is forbidden to give blood. It is forbidden to have a blood transfusion because the literal word of his God, the written word, says, you shall not partake of, eat of blood or flesh or something. There again, I'm ignorant. If people know more about the Bible and the written, I should have a Bible, I should have studied it. Sorry, I haven't. But yes, it is written in the Bible somewhere that you cannot do that. So actually, blood transfusions are probably not something that to take that flesh in. I'm not sure what the flesh and the blood fully means that way, whether it means any sort, but certainly he took it that way and refused the blood transfusion. Now, this is the whole thing of the movie. And the little girl died. His little girl died because the wife changed her mind. She was married to him. She married him because she loved him, but she was not of his faith, but she adopted his faith because she loved him. His father believed, his father before him believed. It was passed down, so it was very ingrained. And he was a true believer, you could say. But the little girl died. He obviously did not think she would die, because that did come out towards the end. He thought that God would, because he was a true believer, he actually did hope that God would spare her life and intervene. But this did not happen. Now, you know, I've seen, when I first saw that movie, of course, like most people, I thought, how foolish we are to let our belief, a literal word, stop medical intervention by giving her the blood. But you see, his belief was that if she was given the blood, yes, he knew that the blood would save her life. He knew that in saying no to the blood transfusion. But he believed, because the written word told him this, and it had been passed down, that yes, it would have sustained her earth life. But in doing so, she would have died at the end of her earthly life and not went into heaven, so not been immortal, not had her spiritual immortal life, shall we say. And so he thought that he was denying her immortality by giving her an extended earthly life, and that was his that was his belief, and that was his reason for turning down the blood transfusion. Now, at the time, like I say, I would have thought, as the movie was showing, because this movie was definitely a movie, I think, to show that, one, that parents should not be able to deny blood to their child on the basis of a religious conviction. Now, this, I believe that the law at the time this movie was made, or just before it at least, and had been the law for many years, that parents have that right, and that that is their child, and that they can, you know, deny blood or give blood. And they, and it has to, you have, the doctors have to had to ask the mother or the father, or both in the case there. But the wife did change her mind in this movie. She changed her mind and went back to the hospital to say, yes, please give my daughter some blood, because she was not of the faith. And she realised that, yes, but it was too late, because the child needed blood fairly quick. But at any rate, before that time, yes, this was the law, that you had to have permission from the parents for the blood transfusion, and they had that right. Whereas shortly after, in conjunction with this very film, I believe, I don't know whether the film had anything to do with it. I would doubt it, but it could be. You'd have to look this up yourself. But the law was changed very soon after, either because of an incident like this. The law was changed that the doctor has the right to override, because the doctor certainly in the movie did try to do everything to override the parent, and eventually took the matter to court to try to change the law, because he did not feel that it was right that the parents had the right to deny the blood, so that and let the child die. And the law was changed shortly after, because of an incident like this where a parent had denied blood on the grounds of the written word, religious belief. Yeah, so that's what happened. Very shortly after this film was made, the law was changed, which means right now that the doctor has the right to give blood, even if the parents say, no, this will deny my child eternal life. You are condemning her to a limited human existence life. That was his belief, you see, from the written word. But now that has been changed to where the doctors, and all doctors will just automatically do that. I thought this was interesting because certainly at the time I went very much with the idea that this is terrible, that a parent on the grounds of religious belief should be able to let their child die. And this was the idea of the movie. Now this is interesting, I think. And I'm going to go into fantasy world. I'm going to go from another viewpoint into a fantasy realm. Like, from his viewpoint, because the film definitely painted the picture that he was in the wrong. Even though, of course, he did expect that his daughter would be saved by God, an intervention, because there are incidences of that in the written word too. But that did not happen. Now, this is interesting because it does, from the fairyland that I'm now coming from, and this is not a belief, by the way, this is just coming from a different viewpoint. His viewpoint, just supposing that his religious written word conviction belief was true, just supposing, because I always say we're spiritual beings, so therefore we probably should be eternal, okay? Because if you're going to go fantasy, you're either going to go one way or the other. If you're in the fantasy of we're spiritual beings, well, spiritual beings should be eternal. Spiritual beings are not temporary physical beings. Temporary physical beings are what we are now. So that was kind of like where he was coming from too, but with the added thing that for whatever reason, to take in the blood denies one or somehow contaminates the body, does it? Or does something. Now, I don't know. I would be very interested if anyone had ideas on this, actually, because I'm not sure myself. I will have to look into it more, think about it more, or get some information. Something will have to come to me to somehow enlighten me on this, shall we say, because I do think it's interesting. I did think it was interesting 20 years ago when I would have seen this film. But if there was a creator God, and if there is, human beings are really eternal and they don't die, so therefore there really is no death. But in this reality we are very preoccupied with death. We fear it, and we are conditioned very much to believe that that is the end, and so we are very stressed about prolonging it. And because we feel our physical bodies so intensely and they give us so many problems and so much pain and suffering and stuff, we're very much inclined to be, yes, in what I call the matrix, because this is all the matrix. Everything, all this very dense physical world is definitely our matrix. Now, this is what it is. And I do think that it is very essential for the God entity to keep us obsessed with the matrix, obsessed with the material, obsessed with the physical, obsessed with the pain, the discomfort of the body, and the fear of that body deteriorating, the fear of that body dying, and therefore losing everything when you die. But interesting, yeah, that movie, from his point of view, this was just a short existence, but for some reason taking the blood into the body somehow made her possibility for going on after death an impossibility. Now, And that's why the title, I do think there is great significance somehow with the blood. Why would you not? Why would a god or a religion tell you not to take blood into your body? Many people believe now that taking the blood in gives more longevity. This is something that, because I had heard only a week or two ago that that there was some medical, well, they're probably not medical, but they would be classed as medical. You know, a bit like we have all these clinics and places where people can inject the stuff into their face to make them look younger, and all these different things that we have now. And there's lots of things people can do to the body to make it younger and to keep it going. And there are some people that inject themselves with, there's clinics that are open. I don't know how many there are, but I only heard it recently that there's some open overseas, not probably where I am, probably in America, I think it's America, where they have clinics where if you've got a spare $10,000, you can go and get a pint of blood injected into you. And some wealthy people think this gives them more youthfulness, or more, might even extend their life. Obviously, they think it regenerates them a bit and makes them better, because otherwise they wouldn't do it, which is an interesting, different view to this, yes, to this film, where the taking of the blood takes from the life, shall we say. But that is, I think I shall finish off on that film now. I'm going to just leave that for you to think about. Or if you've got any ideas, you can think about it yourself. You might actually understand this more than me. I would like to understand this movie, and this, what I see as a kind of, I didn't see it as a contradiction, I just saw it as a mistake, that some people can take the written word too literally, and that therefore they can make a bad decision. I mean, and this is also a religious thing. So there's that movie probably had many ideas, little ideas put into it. Now, I'm not going to criticise any aspects of it. I'm not even going to say now, I'm going to say that whereas when I first saw the movie, I was 100% sure about the movie, 100% sure on my belief about the idea of giving a blood transfusion, and I would have said 100% that it is 100% a good idea, it saves the life now, and I could not imagine that it would have any effect on an afterlife or this or that. But now I would have to say that I really would not know. There's something about that movie that tells me there's something more to all this. And that even the main fella in it, as wrong as he seemed in the film, or as they said in the movie, his action was, you know, completely wrong, but his motive was as pure as heaven itself. In other words, his reason for doing it was not wrong and not negative or evil in any way. It looked like anti-life. I always say evil is anti-life. Live backwards. Evil backwards is life, and evil is anti-life. That's what I always say evil is. You know, it's not bad. It just goes against life. You know, human life. But he was not seeing it that way, because he saw his daughter as an eternal being. So therefore he didn't see that he was anti-life. He thought that he was anti-life if he gave her the blood, because it went against the written word. He thought he was shortening her life. by prolonging her earthly life, he was denying her eternal life. So he thought that he was, see, this is an interesting thing. What would you think about that? If we actually knew that there was an eternal life and that to partake of something into the body would deprive that or contaminate that somehow, then his actions would not have been anti-life. Yes, they would not have been somehow wrong. But it's just an interesting film, an interesting idea. But they did change the law because of this incident. And shortly after this film, I was informed of that years ago. I was not sure if it was true or not, but I know that they certainly did change the law, because there was certainly, you were allowed for a long, long time before the law was changed to um, to your religious convictions were highly valued. They were valid as an excuse or a reason for any action, and even denying blood, knowing that it could save, was perfectly valid up to, must have been, you'd have to look this up yourself because I do not know, but the movie was made in the early 60s, so I'm guessing that this right of the parent, the mother or the father of a child, was valid to deny or or accept blood or anything else. This would have extended to other things, no doubt, too, not just to this particular, but certainly the law was changed. But that's an interesting point too, because, in many other ways, parents are allowed to let their children do many things. They usually do have, at least in my past existence. When I say my past existence, I mean my past reality, because I do believe that my reality has changed a fair bit. Okay, but of course it would. Time changes everything anyway. But my childhood, apart from a few things that were compulsory, like I would think that it was compulsory to go to school. Although it's possible that back then that maybe some children would have been allowed to be homeschooled. I'm not sure about that. Certainly my parents did not do that, and probably were not in the position to do it, because you would have to have some time. The mother would have stayed at home in those days, so that would have been possible. But if a mother doesn't think she has very good education, she might not feel. Also, some parents would have thought that the education system and school was a very good idea. They may even like the idea of being away from their children for a certain amount of time. All these things have to come into play, but apart from that, even religion and things they might have been socially acceptable and commonplace, but they were not compulsory. In other words, a lot of people when I was a child would have went to Sunday school and to church. I did not, but it was not compulsory, but most would have. So, but yeah. So what I am saying is that certainly, as time goes on, sometimes there is an interesting, like that kind of dispute. How much right do parents have over their children? But if parents don't have rights over their children, who does? Who should have a right? What is more sensible, more beneficial, more, I'm trying to find words here, but what I'm saying is that, like in that incident, that's just a very glaring example of should an institution take over a parent's right, or should parents have all the rights over their children? Well, they have rights this way because you don't even have to have a child. You have that right. People will say it is my body, it is my right to do what I want with it. I would beg to differ on that, not as a belief or as a thing. I do not think personally, in my fantasy world, we do not have any rights at all. We do not have rights over our body. We are in a delusionary, artificial matrix world where we think that we have many more rights than what we do. We do not, we have rights of free will, sure. But as I've said before, we are in a matrix. And when you are in a matrix, you might have free will. But if you are mind directed by the matrix, is it your free will? Even your free will is directed. Even when I say it is my body. You know, that makes me sound as though I have free will. But even if if just by the fact or by the circumstance, because circumstance is the matrix. The matrix is, as the movie says, all around us. And the movie, The Matrix, says, what is the matrix? The matrix is all around you. The matrix is control. What is all around you is a video game. It is a matrix that is operated and controlled. It doesn't just randomly happen. It directs things. That's what a matrix is. Our Earth is a matrix. Even if it was natural, it would still be directed in some ways like a matrix. But because it is totally artificial, it appears to be natural, but it is totally operated artificially. It is programmed. We are programmed. We are programmed. At any rate, we are programmed. I am programmed now. Maybe I'm programmed to make the videos because I don't want to make the videos, so I must be programmed to make them. Maybe I think I'm making them of my own free will, but maybe there's a reason that I'm programmed to make them. Then I'll be even more horrified probably because I'll say, hey, but that's it, because you know, there could be things that I say in the videos that might be taken or misconstrued a wrong way. Because like I say, I don't really have affiliations to things. These are just random fantasy thoughts that are for you to make your reality and your sense out of them. I don't want to be too accurate or too straight about any of it because I am unsure of the very medium. I'm unsure of everything in this matrix world. The only thing I'm sure of is that it is a type of matrix. But I do not know the mechanics of it all. I know that we have, you know, internet everywhere. I know that we have certain frequencies that operate over a natural world, or what was originally a natural world. And so then that becomes an unnatural world. But, you know, I'm not a scientist or genius that way to where I would, or even just at a basic level, I do not understand these things. I feel it and I see it to some extent, but to fully comprehend. But that is the problem too with this world, is that we almost need to be able to understand it at a factual, detailed level before we believe things. I'm not one of those people. I do not need that at all. Not at all. I would like more information. I like to substantiate things, obviously, with information and detail. Sure, I do. That's why I watch other videos, you know. But that is only to clarify or to substantiate what is a core belief. And but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to expand, and I don't want to be inflexible, because if you know that old saying, or that one that I've heard maybe on other videos, the only thing you can be assured, that I can be assured of and know for sure, is that I don't know anything. And that is, it's not totally true, but at the same time, it is like saying that there is so much that you don't know. And even what you do know is almost still a mystery, because if you're not operating something naturally and properly, you can know that it's there. You can see it in a way, but it's not functioning properly. This whole world is not functioning properly at all. Even on that statement that I always make at the start of the video, unless I forget, that is not how we are operating in this world. Human beings are not controlling the matrix. They are the controlled controllers. We are the controllers, but we are controlled. So therefore we do not control. It's no good being a creator or putting your effort into something that you don't know what you're creating. You don't know what the true creation is. You don't know what the big picture is. You don't know what you are really doing. You know, if you're, I suppose I could probably try and use some example, but you know, it's awful to have to come up with examples just off the top of your head. But I suppose it would be like if you were working for someone, doing a particular job, an innocent job, but you could be working for some mafia boss that's doing all sorts of diabolical things, but you yourself might only be doing a simple job, thinking you're working for some simple little church or some simple little innocent thing. You might even think it's good, but it might be operated by something bigger that is more devious, shall we say, or something that you probably might not want to be connected with. That would be your choice, because you know, some people might be happy being connected to, you know, those sorts of things. I do not know. I'm not here to make each person. Every person decides what they you know, what's acceptable to themselves. You know what, you know, I think in today's world, a lot of people are finding an awful lot acceptable that they wouldn't have found acceptable not that long ago. So I think we are broadening our minds that way, if that's how you want to see it, that we're broadening our minds. It depends on how you look at it. You can broaden and be broad-minded, but just because you're broad-minded and you accept something or bring something into your life that you would have kept out before, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to better your life. You could be bringing something in that's a detriment to your life. You don't know. You would have to make those choices. But at the same time, because we live in a matrix, we are often making a joint decision on things, in the sense that because we live in what we call these societies, communities, society is the word, I suppose. Particularly, you know, if you live in certain parts of the world. So, you know, you are part of that. You're part of society. Society could be totally crazy. By that I mean the majority of people could be totally insane. Because, as I said in the video yesterday, we have now a lot more people in our society that are what should be classed as clinically insane. Okay, I'm going to say, hey, you would probably say I'm clinically insane. I would say that I'm not I wouldn't say that I have a totally clear mind, no. I would say that that my mind should be much clearer and at a much higher level than what it is. But I don't think that I am at this stage clinically insane. I'm not saying I couldn't be driven insane, because I think that insanity is only a product or an outcome, shall I say, of the matrix, of external forces, of environment, because the matrix is environment. The matrix is all around us. The matrix is control. The matrix, some people cannot stand the matrix. Some people cannot stand the control of the matrix. So therefore they become insane. And so then they become insane in the sense that they want to have control, because the matrix makes them feel out of control. The matrix is too much for them. The matrix is produces too much trauma for them. And this starts from the day you're born, of course. So obviously by the time you've grown up, you're not going to look at this. But this is what happens to all of us. And the matrix then creates circumstances, which is like people and environment around you, that will create trauma, that then will turn you into a narcissistic, psychopathic type of personality. And that will become your personality. And because you have been traumatized, you want control. So those particular personality types in particular need to have control. It's their way of keeping their sanity in a way, but in doing that, they make themselves insane, because even though we do live in a fantasy world, they are living in their own fantasy as well. In other words, they create it's very hard to explain, but they become a law unto themselves in a way, a power unto themselves. All the power is with them, but they're not spiritual human beings. They throw away a little bit of that because they need the control so much. They do tend to throw away quite a bit of their empathy and their emotions for what's around them. They become cold and separated from what's around them. It's a form of protection because of the trauma that was thrown at them. If you've got unpleasant parents or people around you, and they do not value you as a spiritual human being. By a spiritual human being, they do not value you for what you want to be, for what you are. You're only valuable to them as a service to them, or as a benefit to them, or as they want you to be. They want to control you, one way or another. This could be in many ways. Some could be really bad ways, I would think, in the sense that, parents, like that example of the blood, of not giving blood to the child. Parents used to have, and still do have, but not as much, complete control over their children up to a certain age. And this can be good or bad, depending on the parents' spiritual development, I would say. And we're all very limited spiritually in this present world. I would honestly say that even the best of us are the worst in some ways, because I don't mean that in that respect, but I think that we've all been traumatized, we've all been corrupted, and because the world is so artificial and because we are in a matrix, it is not possible for most people to develop spiritually and to get to a high frequency or high vibration. It's all a very similar thing, even though, like I say, I don't fully understand it, but it's, you know, if you've been traumatized and if you have unpleasant people around you or people that do not really care about you, what is your spiritual essence, you will spend most of your time trying to protect yourself instead of developing, as you should naturally, into a free, healthy, happy, spiritual human being that doesn't worry or doesn't care or doesn't have any expectations placed on them. You know, they don't have to be a certain way. They don't have to do certain things. You know, it's hard to explain, and I'm sounding very as though I know it all here, and I don't know any of it. I'm just, you know, it's just that my own personal fantasy belief, and it is a fantasy because it's certainly not something that happens, and it's certainly not something that I have done. I have been guilty of the opposite, like the very things I'm talking against. I have been part of the matrix. I have participated in going along with the matrix, in going along with the circumstances and the people around me, whether they be right or wrong, even though you can know people to be wrong sometimes, or at least not functioning the way that even you or even I would have thought was human in a way. They lack what we would have even seen to be normal. But to be honest, I think now what is not normal and what is not human is becoming acceptable because so many people have been traumatized and we have so many narcissistic, psychopathic people in our society. They are becoming the norm. They're becoming the normal human being. But they are malfunctioning human beings. They may have intelligence and they may have great potential, and many of them do. If they're in a particular field, they can go far. But as a complete human being, they malfunction because they're clinically insane. Because, and this is only what medical things would have said. But don't forget that there's not a lot of study on this. And also, the main problem, I think, is that in our now artificial fantasy world, actually the artificial world is not a fantasy world, but I'm saying that in my way of looking at it, because I say for most people, my way of looking at these things is a bit of a fantasy. So it's my fantasy, if you like. I have to say that because I can't say that it's a fact, because if it's not a fact, even if I'm talking to a psychopath right now, I have to accept that his or her reality is more real than mine. Because if the majority go along with the psychopath or the narcissist or these personality types, if they're acceptable and they're regarded as the norm now in our so-called society, then my way of looking at it becomes delusional and fantasy. And theirs is real, theirs is the reality. They are sane and I am insane. Whereas I'm saying that in the past, at a clinical level, these people would have been classed as insane. This is just a fact. This is scientific. This is doctor. This is medicine. They will tell you this. And they should be getting therapy, shall we say. They should want to get therapy because they are lacking. But if they think that by being more cold and by being unfeeling, that benefits them, because it can benefit them in this artificially constructed world, because the Archon God has created this personality via the environment, via the matrix. And so he wants it to flourish, the God wants it to flourish, and it is familiar to the God entity because the God entity is more of that duality mindset anyway. His personality, or the God entity's personality, whoever or whatever, and whatever denomination he, she, it is of that mindset, only at a genius level and at a level of being able to see the whole earth and manipulate and get the followers, the disciples, and those that are of that mindset to participate in keeping the matrix the way it is. I've gone off track here and got confused and not being coherent. I'm sorry, I realise that. But it is clinically, or would have been classed in the past as clinically. So this is another example of things changing, of the matrix changing and becoming more artificial and more accepting of something that would have been unacceptable. In other words, the matrix is changing people and changing their ideas and changing them all the time. That is what the matrix does. And this, and you know, I'm not completely airy-fairy here or totally delusional, because this is what has kind of happened. It's only a question of whether you think it is beneficial, acceptable, desirable, normal, and a good thing to have the majority of people insane, clinically insane, participating in our society. And in fact, they are the core of society. In fact, they are the society. Because the majority of human beings, whether you believe that your thinking creates reality and your emotions and your feelings have any input into reality, or whether you think we're connected or not, it's still a reality, if I'm trying to get my thoughts here, that if the majority is clinically insane and they accept that as normal and they are participating even just at a physical level in this reality, if you're following me, then that will become the reality. So that means we will have a reality of insanity, a reverse world, which is what we do have. I've said this before. We live in a reverse world. And the reason we live in a reverse world is because most of the people in it are clinically insane. How could that not be true? Because their minds are not functioning as a whole. The only reason I think that our world is even surviving is because these people, these human beings that are clinically insane, are still usually of a very high intellect. They have many gifts and talents. And so if they are directed in useful things, which most of them probably are, our society keeps going. But that doesn't change the reality that they're thinking as a whole, which is why I'm probably not making any sense here. I'm trying to make sense of it myself, because it really means that, yeah, that, you know, how can a society, and this goes on what I've said, what I was trying to say yesterday, that you have to come into what I've sort of presumed to be a possibility. Okay, so maybe I think it's true, but I can't prove this because I don't know the numbers, because we've already established that most people that are psychopathic or narcissistic do not get clinically diagnosed that way. But also, if it is now becoming an accepted norm, it will soon not probably be regarded as a clinical condition that needs to be I was about to say changed or modified, but that isn't really what I think. I think that it is really a question of therapy, of really, it is just a question of these humans that are like this have to really just want to express to someone else, a therapist obviously, their inner anger almost at the trauma that has been caused them, at their anger at the matrix. But they do not acknowledge this because they've put up the defences, and the defences have served them. So they don't think that and because they've eliminated a lot of the emotion for the other human beings, they've put up a wall, you could say, and that has proved to be effective. And they've almost and they, you know, that's serving them, and they don't know that they're giving up their connection with other human beings. In other words, they're out of touch, even at a basic material level in this world anyway. That's what most doctors would say. But at a spiritual level, if they knew an even bigger picture, which is what I always say, we're spiritual beings. Our thought creates reality, and we're all connected, and it's all operating by the vibration, the emotion, and the feelings. Oh, gee, I wish I could get this better to you. And we're all connected. They're even further away from this. And if their God is themselves, because it does become to where they think that because they need that control, because their life has been out of control, because control was taken from them from a young age, as it was from most of us. And so that need for control is very great. Oh, gee, I'm trying to sound like a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and I'm not getting it. But you see what I'm saying? They need that control then. And so therefore they become much more the controlling force in themselves. They need that. It becomes an essential thing. But they lose their connection with other people. And they sacrifice the feelings for other people, which is also part of the connection, because you can't be connected to something, I don't think, very well unless you have some vibrational feeling, emotion with it. And certainly, you know, at a creative level, they're going to be, as we all are though, because, you know, it's not just narcissistic personalities, but the only reason I mention these personalities is because I personally think in my fantasy world, in my delusional fantasy world that I'm now living in, and in my world from the day I've been born, I have only ever encountered those particular personality types, mainly. So it's reasonable for me to assume that the numbers in our community are much higher. And so what I'm trying to say is if there are more people of that personality type in the community, in our so-called world, then that does change how we are able to connect and operate as spiritual human beings, because none of us are operating that way anyway. You know, I'm saying it, but I'm not doing it either. But if the majority of human beings are now becoming of that personality type due to the matrix and due to environment, which is, and due to the people that they interact, which are also narcissistic and psychopathic. You can imagine that we are in a world that is, well, it's not surprising that we're in an insane world, a reverse world, an upside down world, as others have said. And in other words, everything that should be is not, and everything that shouldn't be often is now accepted and becoming a norm and becoming a reality. And I certainly see a bit of that. Now, this is because we ourselves are being changed, because that is a personality type that, if it's extreme, it can be very negative, and it's certainly very negative for human beings who are not of that type, because they tend to suppress then because they are controlling in their mindset, and because they believe that they are right and that they know all. And I'm not saying they don't know a lot in some ways, but it is still that dominating quality. As my family were very dominating, that was something that the word that I would have used to describe them before I knew all this, you know. So that really means that whether you're right or wrong, if you're dominating, and if you're wrong, then but even if you're right, because most of them do not worry about what you think about anything. And everyone should be entitled to have their own free thinking. Is that a bizarre statement these days? That we all should be entitled to our own individual free thinking. That is not the world we live in, no. We do not have individual free thinking. We have joint collective thinking. That is the matrix. That's what I see anyway. And even the narcissist and the psychopath, even though they would not acknowledge this, because they like to think that they control their reality and that they dominate, which they can do. But even they are often very much controlled by the matrix. Their very existence is because of the matrix controlling their environment. Their very existence is only in existence because of total control, total, usually negative environment. Most narcissistic people and psychopaths are not the product of a positive environment at all. It is all negative energy that has been directed, or a lot of the time it is, as I was guilty of just ignorance and ignoring the human being. Like you can have a negative effect on someone, but even to just ignore them can be negative. I personally, I was always of the belief that I would have preferred to have been ignored but allowed to just do what I needed as a child, and I probably would have been better than I am now. But this is not always the case. Even to be ignored is a denial of your existence, because unfortunately from the day babies are born, they tend to need that reassurance, only from their parents mainly. They can get it from other sources, but it's usually not as important. They do seem to need that acknowledgement and love, etc., from their parents. Now, what will happen if, as the family has disintegrated greatly in our world, and like I say, this has been true of myself also, because that's what happens. Your parents do something, you do the same, and it goes on and on. But it gets worse and worse because it becomes even more broken up as time goes on. And the matrix, I think, deliberately sets this up and keeps this going, because from my own personal experience, I went along with the matrix. I went along with the negative matrix because this is a negative matrix we live in. Don't ever think any different to that. It is totally negative. It is negative, and it is meant to be negative, and it is deliberately negative. And looking on the bright side of it, if there is one, if you were aware of this, but most of us are not aware of it, and I'm aware of it too late. But the idea, I think, is that the matrix is totally negative. Human beings, spiritual human beings, are meant to be positive. So they should be countering the negative. Now, in this matrix we're in now, obviously, originally, if you go back to my fairy tale, the original world was not a negative matrix, but it is now. This is the domain we live in now. It has changed. It's become artificial. And so because it's become artificial, it's become very negative, and it's controlled by negative entity that is more technological, more artificial, but it still could be balanced by the positive human beings, but we are not positive now. We go along with the matrix. We have a choice. That's something that is being gradually taken from us because we have relinquished it. It's not taken. It can be taken, but you still have to let it go. We have to relinquish it. So what I'm saying is that this is why the matrix, I think, is still allowed. Some people have said this. It's allowed. It's not blown up. It's not destroyed. Because if it's all negative, you'd think that someone would say, hey, perhaps it should be gone. But it's not gone. It's still here, and it's allowed to go on. And this will depend on your fantasy beliefs, creator, non-creator beliefs, whatever. But, you know, a lot of people do not even believe it's a matrix or that there is a God, entity, deity, whatever you like, that has dominion over it. So, you know, but whichever way you look at it, you can, you know, if you are, you know, long-suffering and prepared to keep listening to my video, you could take it still, I suppose, at a simple level and just say that whichever way you look at it, we are in a world that is out of balance, even if it was just humans here and we had full control over it, even if we get out of balance. Because if what I'm saying is that as human beings, we also have changed. The matrix has changed and got even more negative because we allow it. We say it's okay. We always had free will, and we create in it. Even if you don't think that we create with our thinking directly, you know, and that our feelings and thoughts have any validity whatsoever, I would certainly not agree with that. And that's what I think we are being conditioned to think, that it is okay to just be as we are, try to be positive, but mainly be intellectual about it. And that it is okay to focus totally on the matrix and the physical and have tunnel vision almost and say, this is my ability. I have an ability. I'm going to focus just on whatever my ability is. I'm going to make money out of it, maybe, if I'm lucky. And I'm not going to worry about focusing on developing the whole of my mind almost. Because most people do that. Most people, we tend to specialise, or we tend to focus on what interests us. I know I've been like that most of my life, been very, you know, I bring up the movies, but the movies have been something that I've liked. I've watched a lot of movies. I've liked watching movies. The Matrix likes you to watch movies anyway, so that's okay, you know, because they're technical, you see. But the thing is that, you know, but I've learnt a bit from them. But I didn't realise until very recently that everything is in the movies. That the movies is more like an encyclopedia, history books, books about now, books about potential future. But there's a line in a very famous movie called Lawrence of Arabia, and once again I'm quoting things, but you know, no affiliation to anything. But in that movie, the Arabs that are in the movie were different to like the English people that were also in it, but it was mainly because it was in Arabia, and their whole belief system was, it is written. They would say, when the Englishman says to the Arab man, this shouldn't have happened, you are wrong, and he just says, it is written. In other words, forget about it, it is written. It was already foretold, it had to be. It doesn't matter whether it was right or wrong, it was going to happen. I am not responsible. You know, it is all good because it is written. They say all good these days, but you know, and in a way, in saying it is written, which I've certainly never believed that everything has to be, and that everything is whatever will be, whatever, all that. But you know, if everything is a setup and things are continually being set up as our reality is, then it is quite likely that that saying does have a lot of validity, because if things are set up to progress and to behave a certain way, we are programmed a certain way, the reality and the environment is programmed a certain way, set up a certain way, certainly what the Matrix wants to be will be. And it is written, they write it, and then it becomes a reality because it is set up that way. So it is much more likely that that is written saying has, you know, some validity to it. It would only be, as that movie did show a bit, strangely enough, the Englishman was always trying to go against what was written. He was always trying to intercede and change the reality. He was not like them where they were quite content to let things just happen. He was not quite as keen to let the Matrix just happen. Obviously, he didn't think he was in a matrix. He thought that his actions, that basically humans decided what should and could happen. And he thought he was only dealing with humans, whereas in reality, if there's a matrix, obviously you're not just dealing with humans, you're dealing with the matrix. And if humans have changed and you assume that humans are not quite the same as what they used to be, then also that changes your reality too. Because if you have an idea that the world should be a certain way, even the psychopath might want the world to be better. because even a psychopath does not want to live in an unpleasant world for himself, okay? He probably doesn't. But he probably would find violence and ugliness certainly a lot more acceptable than a spiritual human being, or someone that wants a peaceful, pleasant, free kind of non a spiritual human being is not really supposed to, I wouldn't think, be very dominating and controlling. They don't like that. They like the free thinking and the free actions, and where even though they're connected, everyone is doing their own thing, you know. Whereas a more controlling, narcissistic, psychopathic type of person is a lot more interested in not only controlling their own life, but controlling mine and everyone else's, or anyone else that comes. So therefore, even though they might want a better world to live in, or a more, might have ideas that all I'm trying to say is that if you think that you've got a common idea that human beings are all the same, and that you think, and everyone talks about peace and love and all this sort of stuff, this is, even the world, I still hear this promoted everywhere in the world. You don't see it in reality. You see it in reality, in fake reality, in our fake reality, but you don't really see it most of the time. And how can you? Because you might have that idea and you assume that other human beings are similar. They might, we all know that we're not all the same, but you don't think that you've got real extreme people. And you think that, as I thought in the past, that even if you do have a few extreme psychopathic type of people, that their numbers are minute. But what I'm trying to say is that their numbers are not minute. They are a majority now. They could well outnumber human beings, for all I know. In other words, they could well outnumber the more the I would say spiritual human beings, but all human beings are spiritual. Even narcissistic people are spiritual. It's just that they are not operating spiritually. They're operating less spiritually than you and me, even though we also operating. Well, personally, I would say that I'm operating at a very low level spiritually, but we're supposed to be operating at a high level spiritually. Once you get to that higher level, even your intellect, as I said before, would be greater, and so you are sane too. You become more sane. If the narcissistic person became more spiritual, they would become sane. So everything would fall into place for them, and they would be a great benefit to us, to me, to you, to anyone, because some of these people are very. That is why the Matrix has closed them down, I think, too. Because, the more abilities, the more you can shake the Matrix up, the more the Matrix is going to close you down, I would think, because, the Matrix wants to keep it negative. It's always working negative, Humans are meant to, I think, work against it positive, and therefore you end up with a balance. But the Matrix itself operates totally negative. It's not meant to operate positive, I don't think. Humans are put here to operate positive, to work against it, but we don't know that. And most of the time we're operating negative and playing along with the Matrix, and manipulated and controlled and directed by the Matrix 100% most of the time. I know I have been. Because we believe in the Matrix too, because it is our real world. We create it. We create it either whether you think you're spiritual or not. Even if you believe that we are just solid and we have no spirit and we're very basic, and even if you believe that we're, couldn't care less, have no compassion for anything. We still create in it, even most, that's common sense. We all think we still create in it in some way. We contribute to it at least. And we do. But, if we sort of knew that we were up against such opposition, that there was total negativity, instead of that it's not really like that and that it's just kind of random, we would probably pull our socks up, shall we say, all of us. We'd have to. Well, we should be doing that probably if this is the case, but we're not connected. We're not operating that way. We're not connected. We're not aware that we are all being pushed, that there is total negative opposition to us all the time. From the day we're born, we're not aware of that. We're supposed to be aware of that. But just in our natural state, we should automatically probably kind of know and see what is positive and negative. But instead we get caught up in the negativity. We get caught up in the matrix. We get caught up in the show of the matrix in a way. A lot of it is false and show, and we get caught up in that. We want to be accepted, even at a superficial level. It's very superficial in a funny kind of way. If we really were honest with ourselves from young, but it starts from so young that and then we get bombarded with it by the matrix, by the technological world. We get bombarded with the superficiality of it. We start to think that is all it is, and that is all important, and then that consumes us. And we also don't think there's consequences. That's another thing too. I think that I've certainly thought that. I thought, well, you do a little bit of wrong, but you think that you pay a bit. You'll pay the piper a little bit, but you don't think you're going to pay it quite as much as what you end up paying it. I know that's been my experience. I knew I would have to answer to some things one day, just in this real world. I'm not talking about beyond this world, or beyond this life, a physical life thing. I'm not talking about. I'm talking about in this reality. Even you even at the level that I used to be at. By that I mean that unaware that there was such negativity deliberately coming at us. I thought I just was selfish and made a lot of mistakes myself, or that I just got too fearful and therefore went along with, the matrix. But I didn't know it was a matrix. I thought it was just circumstances, And but I did know that I would have to answer to it, to even the humans that you hurt. That you'll probably have to answer to one. But I didn't realise what I would be answering to. I didn't realise that the matrix had taken over even the humans to such an extent. Because I thought, hey, punish me a little bit for my sins, shall we say, or for my ignorance and my abandonment of what should have been normal duties or normal, I can't think of the words to explain these things, but what you half know is what you should do, but you let the circumstances overwhelm you. You let other people push you around, and you think that they have more power than you. And because the matrix has told you that you do not have much power in yourself, you feel too weak to take it on. And so then the matrix wins, and the matrix takes over your life and takes over the people around you. And what should have been your responsibility then becomes the matrix responsibility, and the matrix is all negative. So the matrix will take over your children and your environment and your world. And you will not be able to rectify that later on as easily as what you would think. because by that time the matrix will have made your children negative, it will have made your environment negative, and it will have made your world negative. Most of us only live in our small environment, so we don't really care what's going on the other side of the world. But quite frankly, it's getting to the point now where the world is all one. It's all the same. Even the internet makes it one, but it is actually one. And it always has been one, in the sense that the matrix has always been governed, ruled, looked over by a God entity. You know, we're not like back in the fantasy Garden of Eden, where we were plonked here, given free will, given the earth and the world and everything in it to sustain us, to help us, for us to play in to our heart's content, and to just develop and evolve naturally, abundantly, and populate this world in a positive way, I would think, because there would not have been any negativity, because it wasn't a matrix, you see. So there wouldn't have been negativity coming against us. So we would not have even known what negativity was. You know, the tree of good and evil, right and wrong, that was not something that we needed to know, because it was not going, there was not going to be evil or negativeness coming at us, because it wasn't a matrix. It was a natural world that we were in sync with, that we were part of. And, you know, you don't separate yourself from part of yourself. But that's what we've now done. We've now separated ourselves from part of ourself. We don't know most of ourselves. We don't know what we are. We don't know that we are meant to be positive, totally positive, but now we are in a matrix where negative is coming at us all the time. So, like the saying of my father used to always say, and he was, in my view, narcissistic personality disorder, even though he saw himself as, yes, a godlike human being that knew everything and had full control, or at least really tried very hard to have full control over his body and his environment, etc. And but at any rate, I lost track of myself there in mention. Yeah, but his saying always was, and I never knew why he said a lot of the things he said, but these are just sayings too. I will say sayings from anyone. He used to always say, I'm further off from heaven now than when I was a boy. And he certainly was. And he did not believe in any religion or any God. He was what you would call atheist or whatever. But he always used to say that, I'm further off from heaven than when I was a boy. And certainly, if you think there is any spiritual connotation with a heaven or something, then certainly that was true, because he certainly had cut himself off from actually having real love for other human beings. He didn't have always hate for them. At least I wasn't aware of that. But he probably did have dislike of many human beings, I would imagine, if he was of that personality type. It did surface at times. It did surface at times. But you know, if you are under someone's control, they don't need to show their negative side so much anyway, because if you serve someone, they don't need to treat you too badly, do they? Whereas if you don't serve them, then they can show you that they don't like you, and they can, you know, show the full venom of their dislike, anger, or hatred, or whatever it is. And but it's essentially a disconnection from your spiritual connection with other human beings. It's just like saying, I'm not connected to them. I'm an entity only in my own right, and I feel no connection to other human beings. But more importantly, you don't have any feelings for other human beings. So you don't actually care if other human beings are there or not, or if anything happens to them. You're not going to feel it for them. Now, I've always been a loner, so I'm not connected to human beings. But if someone tells me something about themselves where they're suffering in some way, even though I don't want to feel it, I will feel a bit of it. So I haven't lost the total empathy that narcissistic and psychopathic type of people tend to lose. It is a form of protection. But once you protect yourself 100%, you're also cutting yourself off from your own feelings and feelings for others too. And you're assuming, I think, based on your negative experiences and the matrix. I say that experience is all the matrix, because the matrix is an artificial construct around us that is like, it is all planned, it's all staged, it's all just acting. And not everybody in it is a real actor either. Some are very bad actors, very bad human beings, in the sense that they're acting, but they're not. There's no feeling behind the acting. But but that is what acting is. That's why we pay the movie stars to act. They're fake. They're phony. There's nothing real about them. We call that acting. And we admire acting in our world. These are our little gods in our world, our little celebrities and people. I know I've been guilty of it. I say guilty because, it's kind of strange in a funny kind of way that that we admire what is fake. We should admire what is real, probably, really, rather than what is fake, because it is really more valuable. I mean, it's not just me being uppity about this. It's not about that at all, because, what is fake can be quite nice, but the original will always be the best. And that's something that humans, I think that I now realise too late, that real humans are the original, and they are the best, and they were meant to be the best. But they are not the best, because we don't live in a world that encourages that or feeds that. You can have like you plant a seed, and if you don't look after it, as we haven't looked after ourselves or our loved ones or the world or the life that's in it, and so that seed does not develop properly or fully and ends up mutating, and sometimes hardly grows at all, but it will always be stunted. And this is what we're doing, and this is what we have done, this is what I've done. And now I'm sorry, but unfortunately, if everybody was sorry and wanted to turn it round and regretted it, it's possible that we could at least bring things back into balance. I don't know. It would be hard, but without the awareness of that, this is what the awareness is about. To just see facts, even to see facts and acknowledge them, and say we live in a contrived world. We live in a fantasy contrived world. If you can see that and acknowledge it and actually see it as a reality, because people need to see it as a reality. They're not going to be like me where they'll accept a fantasy. They're not going to be interested in fairy tales. They're not going to say fairy tales are true. They're not going to say the movies are true. They're going to say the possibilities. They're going to say they're fantasy. They're someone's imagination. Even imagination is part of the spirit. Imagination is showing us that there is creation in the spirit, and I'm not putting this right. On the other hand, they could just be being downloaded with factual information by the God entity too. They may have no imagination. They may be non-spiritual. They may be just fake people that take the credit for the God entity. That's another possibility, I would think. I don't know. But I don't know that. But that's a possibility, I would think. That just come to me now. But because I would think that I was going to think that spiritual humans beings should be this, that, and whatever. But in reality, that is not the reality. And maybe it is not necessarily what every human being is. Because to survive in the matrix, because we are fearful of the matrix, because the matrix is all around us, and because it is so controlling, and because we at least partly believe in it. Even myself, I know it's not totally real in a way, but it still is real for me. It's in front of me. I have to deal with it. So it's still partly real. It's certainly physically real. And because our senses are deliberately heightened in this reality, and we're not allowed to retreat into ourself in a way to where we can see or even think clearly, to where we can create and then we could see what we were doing. We're not allowed that. That doesn't happen in this reality. We don't go out into a barren area, for instance. I'm really going fantasy here, by the way, so don't laugh too much. But, like if I went out into a desert and I was a high spiritual human being, which I'm not, but which we should be, I'm saying, and my thinking creates reality, and I'm of the higher spirit. By that I mean I'm feeling much oneness with the world. I have good feelings. I have high vibration. I'm trying to put it into words, not doing very well. The all-connected part, I think we'll have to leave that here, because you would have to assume that this is the problem with being connected, and how many people you are connected with, and what those people have become or what they are, is that theoretically I could go out into that desert, and if I was feeling very good, and I visualize, it's a desert, and I visualize, and with my feelings and my good thinking want to create flowers. Theoretically speaking, those flowers should appear in the desert. where the flowers probably wouldn't normally grow. Now, I could have this wrong, but either way, maybe I shouldn't have picked a desert. But supposing there's at least dirt, theoretically speaking, they should be able to grow, because even I'm not 100% sure how even the original natural world would have worked. I don't know if there was certain methods to it. In other words, that even in the creative process that you still would need to have certain conditions, that you would have to be aware of that. I don't know that. You know, it could well be that just the thinking with the emotion and the right thought could create anything, anywhere, anytime, under any circumstances. That may well depend on how powerful the human being is, maybe, or how high their spiritual level is. But it could well be the other. There again, I probably ruined the video and made myself look stupid by saying this. And you know, because if I say something stupid, then it makes other stuff that I say invalid. But I'm honestly saying, because this is not happening, we're not in the right world, we have so many distractions, frequency disruptions, you could say, disruptors, if you want to look at it that way. Just the fact that we are natural, spiritual human beings, even if you don't want to leave out the spiritual, even if you want it, if you just say we're just natural human beings, but we're in an unnatural environment, naturally, if we can and should create totally on our own, we are not in the right environment for that. But that doesn't mean that it can't happen, because that will depend on, really, I would have to say, how strong, how truly advanced is the human being really, and how advanced were they meant to be, but how, you know, all things considered, how truly powerful and advanced are they? I don't experience this, but I do think that there are very few limits, or there should be very few limits on the human being. But instead, our reality is that we are condensed into extreme limitation. And this has probably happened over a hugely long period of time. And we ourselves, you know, you buy into one lie after another, or you buy into an acceptance of an unlimited reality. You buy into a fake world. You buy into a fake knowledge even of what your world is, even for that matter. Like, if you know, a bit like that. I'll have to close off soon because I'm sure the time's getting late. But a bit like that. It was a documentary. It was only a little tiny thing. A documentary. I wish I could show it to you. And I mentioned it before, where if you have, like, there were three human beings and they were in a cave of some sort, and they couldn't get out the cave. And I can't remember the exact details. I'll have to try and find it again. But they could only see their reflection on the wall. They could only see their shadow on the wall. And that was their whole world. They didn't know that there was an opening in the cave not far to where they could get out and go out into the sun and see the big real world. That became their world. And it became such a reality to them that they didn't want to get out. They were fearful to get out. Someone got out and then come back and told them, hey, look, come on out. There's a big world. There's an opening. There's a fantasy world out there that you wouldn't believe. It's You can't believe it, what I'm seeing. That was just like our Earth, really. But they were only used to looking at that wall. And they thought he was crazy, I think. They didn't, and they were fearful. They didn't want to leave it because it was just too much for them, probably. I don't know. I'd have to look at the thing again. But essentially, it is that the more you become limited, and the less you know, and the less you, and if you are told, it's a bit like this computer world where we're getting more into the technology, into focusing on the computer. That then becomes more of a world, but that's a limited world. You're not looking around at the big world so much. Now, it hasn't happened yet, I don't think, and it isolates you from other human beings too, because you can then become more interested in what's going on the screen. I know I've lived my life a lot that way. I used to say, oh, at one point, because you have so much bad luck with people, and so many, of a certain type of people, so you say, hey, oh, I think I'll just watch the fantasy figures on the television. Because even if they're naughty, like the people in real life, they can't actually hurt me. Whereas, in reality, you get frightened of that. But then you are limiting yourself. So you become like myself, a limited human being then. Paranoid, frightened, afraid, and actually unaware of what's going on around. The real world can start to change. The matrix changes. And even the people in the matrix change. And you wake up one day and you realize you are living in an insane alien world. Yeah, you wake up one day and realize that you're living in an insane alien world. You thought you were crazy, and then you look around and the world has changed so much. And you see it still changing, and you can see that it is headed in a certain direction. Because once you go too far into something, it's like those men in the cave. You can't turn back. You can't look at the true reality because it's too strange for you. See, I look at some people now and I see, and I actually have the audacity, you'd say, and it is an audacity in a way, I apologise, but I do see insanity. Not because I think they are raving lunatics pulling the world apart, but just because they do not see what, they do not just act totally rational. They don't seem to, you can't talk to them totally rationally. You can if you keep it at a certain level, but they're not, if something doesn't appeal to them or it is not part of their world or what they think is reality, they will destroy you and your perception of reality, because they're not interested in being free. They're not saying, hey, well, look, okay. They're not even satisfied with saying to me, oh, you're just out of touch, because I could accept that. I could say, well, yeah, this is my reality. I live in a fantasy world. We both, really, we're all in a fantasy world because it is, it's just a question of what is the real truth of this reality. That's what I would say. Just a question of what is the real truth of it? Is there a real truth? Because everything is really only how each person sees the world, or their people around them and their life. And that's like I say, to me, that's just all the matrix. I think we're in a matrix, and we're playing in the matrix, and we're played by the matrix because we're unaware that we are in a matrix playing in a matrix. We would not be played so much if we were aware of this. Once you start to see that, it's a bit like if you're in a relationship and you realize you're being manipulated by the other person, you will start to say, hey, I'm being played. But until that point, you think that it's just two people openly connected and having a conversation, having a relationship or whatever. You don't think that there's any ulterior motive behind it. You don't think there's anything's being set up. You think it's just you and someone else naturally making things happen together in cooperation almost. You're both thinking similar even. You're not against one another. You're not in opposition. Whereas in reality, some people are like the Matrix and they work for the Matrix in this respect. They may not know they're working for the Matrix because they don't know they're players in the game being played too. This is, if they did, they would probably shove up against that Matrix negative harder than me, which is kind of sad because some of the most powerful people are being even more played because the Matrix doesn't want the positive human beings forcing too much against them. You know, the idea is, you know, because it's all about it. It is a game. It is a game in a way. See, the God entity is playing the negative game, and he's playing with all his might, all its might. Human beings are playing in it too, and they're meant to be pushing the other way, the positive way. He's playing for real. Human beings are not playing for real because they don't know what is real. So how can we? So we're not pushing up against very hard at all. And we're not aware that some of us are being played so much, and that we have been played, and that our very personalities are played even, which is why we have, like I say, a much bigger majority now of narcissistic personality, which is essentially negative. It's negative in my view to other people because it doesn't care for other people. It only cares for itself. But in my view, they are being played too because some of them are successful, okay, but they'll only be successful if they play completely for the Matrix. The Matrix has to have harmony in its negative realm. If you follow me, you know, I don't know whether I'm saying. In other words, because the Matrix knows everything and knows all, because the Matrix not only plays humans, but it is playing at a level that we are not playing at, that we are unaware of, because the Matrix knows my thinking, my reactions, my strengths, my weaknesses, but I don't know the God entity's strengths, weaknesses, or the Matrix strengths, weaknesses, and I certainly don't know what their next move is going to be. They can anticipate mine. In fact, they can set up mine because they set up the circumstances of my existence. But I would add, this is just my own little bit here, and you know, I've said this before. Humans are extremely limited. But if they knew that they were deliberately limited, they would realize that they are deliberately limited because they are not really meant to be limited at all. They are meant to be limitless. And if they realize that, and if they could come into their own in a way, and in conjunction with others, obviously, only with others that are of the same. But don't forget that their power could be even greater than what I realise. It is possible that they could even have an influence over that which is not of their kind, shall we say, not of the natural realm, because there's a lot of artificial in this construct, because it is an artificial construct. See, I don't know how much is 100% real or not. By that I mean organic or natural human. And even as humans, it is still all a computer type thing. It's just that the human being was meant to be the most advanced form of that spiritual type of computer. I'm talking through my hat, aren't I? I'm almost surprised at my own stuff that I'm saying, because I'm saying that this does sound too much in a way. And yet, it's either fantasy or reality. But I personally think, or at least surmise, or at least see a lot of merit in it, in that if the human beings are so pathetical and so weak and so limited, which they are, which we are, and which I've certainly seen myself that way, why does there have to be so much negative opposition to us? You know, if we are what we are, we would just be allowed to, left to be, because we would just destroy ourselves and we wouldn't be of any threat to anything anyway. We wouldn't be rocking the matrix because we're limited and we're just these pathetical physical human beings. But in reality, even if you take it at a purely human level, there is opposition by other humans that are more powerful to suppress the littler humans. And depending on how much negativity is coming at you, you would have to say, if you know that you're pathetical and you're limited, you have to say, why would there be so much negativity at you? Why would that be necessary? You would have to surmise that we are denied, or, yeah, like those men in the cave, that we're meant to go out and see the big world. And it's only a stone's throw away, but we are not allowed to see it. And we're not allowed to develop ourselves. Because if you have no potential, there's no need to suppress. I'm not going to try to control something that's already limited and controlled, not unless I'm total crazy ratbag. I suppose that's possible. Because you do see some humans that do that a bit in a way. You kind of say, why do you want to push something round that's clearly less? I mean, there is that. Okay, so you know, I can't actually put a good argument to it. But look, they're all possibilities. Take what I say one way or the other. It's all fantasy. It's all a delusion. But it sure as hell, I was going to say, it sure as hell appears real. Okay, I'd better go because I think I've been too long talking and I think I'm very late and tired. So thank anyone for listening. I think if anyone has gone the distance, you are, yes, indeed, a remarkable human being. You should be at a high spiritual level if you can listen to me for a few hours, I would say. You've already shown extreme endurance, patience, durability. You can only put that into practice another way, and you've got so little information out of what I said, so I would have to say that you must be not tolerant, but you are happy to get a very little out of a lot, because yes, sometimes a little bit can, at least for me, I only get a little bit of information at a time, and if I'd have got that in the past, it would have been a bit of a revelation, you know. So you can't, none of us, unless you really are at a high level, none of us can really expect to get a huge amount at one go. And either way, it might be too much for us anyway. I know it's too much for me. This whole reality is too much for me. So sometimes you almost have to just get a little bit at a time in order to cope with it, because to go from one reality to another, in other words, to go from reality into a fairy tale, if you're going to be Alice through the looking glass, not everyone is game enough to jump through the looking glass. They might want to have a peek, but to jump through, yeah, it can be too much for most of us, to be honest. So whereas if you could just have a little peek and then jump back, you know, you might still glimpse something, get something. So anyway, good night. I think it was day and now I think it's nearly night. So I've certainly bored you for beyond endurance, you know. Good night.